Hello everyone, I am Tacit, and today I'm going to be going over the new Gems of War faction of Emperinazar, as well as some techniques for it, as well as various teams. So this faction is a brown-yellow faction associated to Kazale, which is this kingdom right over here, as far as where the 4 troops count towards. As far as the layout for the delve, it is a pretty average one, nothing really too special going on with it. Main thing to note is that this room right here is always the treasure room, and the order that you're pretty much always going to go for this delve is taking this room, then the middle 2, then the top 3, and then take the treasure room. There are some exceptions to this. For example, this one's a Cedric right here, so you might want to take that a little bit earlier to get that gold boost per every single room. However, generally speaking, it's the first one on the bottom, middle 2, top 3, take the treasure room, finish out the delve. And that's basically the cycle that you're going to do basically every single time if you're just looking to optimize based on the overall loot that you'll end up getting. You could, of course, switch it up a little bit depending on what the multipliers are, but more often than not, that is going to be the order that you're going to want to go in. As far as the weapon and the troop that comes from this place, as far as the weapon, you can obtain it, of course, from the events. It ends up coming with, I believe, 410 gems once you get it onto tier 4. It's a pretty lackluster weapon. You'd pretty much just have for completion's sake. Deal some damage to the last enemy, and if they and then either gains an extra turn or summons a kobold. Basically, every single thing associated to this faction has a extra turn or some kind of other effect. They're actually all goblins as well, as far as the troops. They all have a goblin naga typing, and they all have an ability that has a 50% chance to extra turn or 40% chance for a secondary ability. As far as the troops themselves, none of them are really going to be that viable outside the game mode, except for maybe the Emperinazar, in which case she's primarily going to be used for 2 things. She gets to summon Bone Storm at the start of battle, which very occasionally could be useful depending on the team. And the more important thing is she gets to gain 2 life and magic to all allies when matching for 4 times or more gems. So basically every extra turn that you take from the board. There's already an ability that somewhat does this, where Hindla ends up doing this for all giants, giving them 2 life and magic. However, this, as you can see, gives it to absolutely everything in the game, not just giants. So even though her ability is a little bit worse, it does have the capability of giving this absolutely everything. So anything that gets a really good boost off of this. Gargoyle is probably one that gets a particularly good one. However, things like Truffle and stuff like that would also get a pretty substantial bonus. Basically anything that uses life and or magic to a very good boost ratio is going to be potentially good with this. It does take a while to ramp up, so I don't really feel like it's going to be used that often. Its ability itself is also a little bit lackluster, just basically giving you a bunch of life. If it was an automatic extra turn, it'd be a little bit better. One other thing to note about these 4 goblins is they technically make Goblin King a bit worse. Goblin King prior to this, due to all goblins previously having an automatic extra turn, now they don't. So that's going to be a little bit of a liability towards him, since now not all goblins have an automatic extra turn, and now some of them have a 50%. Aside from that, nothing else here is particularly useful. As far as the main one that you'd probably use to carry through the faction, though, probably not this one because his bonus is way too low for when you're doing a faction. But the main one you're likely going to be doing is Kobold Knight. He ends up hitting 2 enemies for the full damage, and while it is a 50% chance, he does have a chance to extra turn, as all of them do, and it also ends up getting a stun, so you can end up stunning away their skull reduction, their dodge, and anything else that they might have that might be annoying. So overall, it's probably going to be one of the better damage sources that you have for the faction. But outside of it, not really going to be used too much. Though it does kind of remind me a little bit of a Corvash in a sense, in that he has like that double stun, just as physical damage rather than a true damage. So it could be like a super low rarity Corvash if you really need alternative to that, since he is only ultra rare, which makes him super accessible. So those are about the only 2, Emperinazar and Kobold Knights. The other 2 pretty much not really going to be used much, and I don't really foresee them really being used within the faction or outside of the faction. Anyways, as far as teams for the faction, first one that we have here, the first 3 are the ones that I used, and the rest of them are basically going to be going over other alternatives that you can be using that are a bit cheaper. As far as this first team, it is Mountain Crusher, Guard's Avatar, Sir Quentin Hadley, and Gimlet. You probably see me using this a lot lately. Ever since Sir Quentin Hadley came into the game, this became a really good Rowan alternative when you don't have the color options. If you don't have Guard's Avatar plus Sir Quentin Hadley, you can replace them for Gargoyles. Alternatively, if you're replacing them for Gargoyles, you can also go with Mountain Slicer, or sorry, with gosh, what's that one slicer weapon called? It's actually in Soulforge this week. Normally I don't advise, or I don't mention it, because most people don't have it. However, it's actually in Soulforge. A Stone Slicer, right? Yeah, Stone Slicer. I actually realized it right before I even saw it. But Stone Slicer is really good to use with Gargoyles because it does count as for the construct bonus. And while there is no hero that counts towards it, it has really good synergy. It's also one of the only few of these double weapons that end up feeding it mana into itself. The purple goes into itself because it uses blue-purple, and then the brown goes into the Gargoyle. So worth potentially considering. However, you only use it for the earlier battles, and it does fall off by about 100 or so do be wary of that. However, Stone Slicer, really good for Gargoyles, like triple Gargoyle into Slicer, or double Gargoyle Gimlet, or some other mana accumulator if you're under different color restrictions. Ends up working out very, very nicely, and is worth considering. Not normally one I mentioned, since Stone Slicer is not a weapon that is normally obtainable, but hey, this week it still is for another 2 days. Anyways, as far as the next option, this is why I ended up running for a lot of the mid-range. I did Mountain Crusher, double Tina 9000 into Arachne Weaver. If you do not have a second Tina 9000, you can use a Grey King as an alternative for the damage output there. This team is obviously based entirely off of true damage, so this ends up stacking to be quite a bit of damage. You throw the Tina 9000 down, it ends up poking them a bunch. You then clean up with Weaver, which gives you a bunch of explosions, and if you're using the Grey King, you can just use it for more additional disable, plus it still does true damage. And Mountain Crusher, of course, is what you do to mana accumulate, and the Mechanist class is used to half mana start to Tina 9000. And that's pretty much the full premise with that. As far as the next team, the one that we ran for most rest of the time, it was Mountain Crusher into a High King Irongut, Vashtagan, and Gimlet Stormbrew. I think for all of these, I've actually used Gimlet Stormbrew for the most part. It's a really good mana accumulator. Really great when you're on a brown-yellow restriction, given that it's a yellow that could feed into brown. So it ends up just working out really well. Of course, the main premise of this is basically standard High King Irongut. You don't have access to Zugoff and stuff like that since it is a brown-yellow restriction for the faction. So you can end up using things like a High King Irongut. You could even double up on High King Irongut if you want to mess around with that. A few other alternatives you can do, but this is why I just ran for it. Do make sure you have an alternative to get rid of Immune to Devour, though. Ideally, a Curse option. Main reason for this is so that you can get rid of those immunities even if they have Impervious, and this thing gets to do it specifically off of its final trait whenever you take Browns. And given that you're going to have a Brown Storm and a lot of Browns coming in, you're going to be having plenty of Browns to end up just cursing out the entire enemy team, and you just have High King Irongut get all the Devours down. Okay, so for cheaper teams, one that you can end up going with is a triple Finesse into pretty much any weapon that is good. You can use one of Doom weapons. I showed it here with a Black Manacle just because it's a pretty cheap good weapon to use. But you can use it with any of the Doom weapons would ideally be best. And Nimbus Bow is also a pretty good alternative if you happen to have it from when you got it from the event week from several months back. But anyways, basic premise with this is Finesse gets to keep giving your allies mana. Whenever there is a storm, you're going to have Perpetual Yellow Storm, which will also feed it mana. You'll be able to constantly keep attacking with this. It also does additional damage to yellow. It's super tanky. It gains additional stats, so you can just extra turn spam a little bit at the beginning of battle to gain up your stats, and doesn't just kind of go from there. And it just keeps poking over and over again. This can be used literally for the entire time, though it does fall off as far as speed towards the later battles. However, it can be used the entire time. And you just use whatever your weapon is to basically do cleanup. Ideally a Doom weapon, but Black Manacle still works since it has that 20% Devour, and you're mostly using this as a cleanup option ideally to help poke with additional damage. Next one we have here is more of a scroll spam oriented team. It's a Mang into Angry Mob, Harpy Mage, and Keeper of Souls. Basically the center of this team does mana accumulation with Angry Mob and Harpy Mage covering the mana accumulation aspect. One interesting thing about Harpy Mage whenever you have the enchant within a delve or any other game mode is she has a 75% mana start, which starts her with 10 mana, and enchant on the first turn would bring her to 12. Basically meaning on the second turn she would end up having full mana. She's basically a second turn Empower when you have an enchant effect at the start of battle. This is pretty useful because, well, she's second turn Empower. Even though she doesn't have an Empower ability, she effectively does as a second turn effect. So all you really have to do is wait a turn, cast her ability, and then just get rolling from there. She also creates a Brown Storm, which is really good. She's basically like an alternative Mountain Crusher as a troop, so it works out really good for getting you Brown. And given that the rest of this team uses Brown, it'll be very effective. You can use a +2 Brown banner. This one specifically is a Brown into a +2 purple. This is to feed Keeper of Souls a little bit more. Obviously, the main premise of this team is to keep spamming Keeper of Souls. You throw down a Mang, you get your high attack by tearing away their armor into attack value. You then keep spamming Keeper of Souls in order to control the board, and then you win. Every barrier you take, or every Brown you take, you gain a barrier. You could even put in Rage on your hero if you really wanted to. Ends up working out decently. And lastly, we got Pure Faction. I haven't actually done Pure Faction. We're going to be doing that tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'll be doing 500 Deathless and 500 Pure Faction. But as far as what I feel like will end up working, it is double Kobold Knight into double Emperinazar. The main reason for this is the main premise of regardless of what you go, you want to go double Emperinazar in your back slots. The main reason for this is you want to not die. Not only does it have a very large HP gain and a bunch of summons, but you'll also be able to go gain additional stats and keep ramping up. Every extra turn you take will end up giving you 4 life and 4 magic with 2 of them, since that of course does stack. So every single extra turn will give you quite a bit of a benefit, and you can kind of keep stacking. It's almost kind of like the Finesse team, where you kind of stack a bit of extra turns to before you actually start casting in order to have a little bit more power. You need to kind of do the same premise here, though you might need to cast a little bit more often, given that you don't have as many damage sources, given that your kobolds that you summon will be your main damage sources. Keep in mind she can summon any of these 3, so she could also summon kobolds, she could summon kobold knights, and she can summon kobold magi. Your first 2 slots by the final battle will likely be completely different, assuming they end up dying out, though he does have 30% scar reduction, so hopefully he'll live. But even if he doesn't, the Emperinazar will just end up resummoning them, and you'll pretty much be good to go. As long as you have double Emperinazar in your team by the end of, or by the final battle, you should be perfectly fine. If you could bring 2 of them into the very final battle on 500 Pure Faction, you should be able to cheese it just by constantly resummoning over and over and over again, and you'll eventually be able to just chip them out with a bunch of damage. It seems like it's going to be a pretty slow faction, however, it should be relatively safe. You can kind of ramp up to a point where you're not really going to die, and then from there it's basically just poking them very, very slowly with various kobolds, whatever 3 you end up getting, and just kind of keep chipping them down until they're dead. But it should be overall straightforward. I am going a little bit cheaper this time around. I am trying to do it with a little bit less. It is actually possible to do these events with 1,910 gems. That's actually the lowest you could do it on, which means you bought tier 7 4 times. However, we did go the 5 times route. This allows us to skip a little bit of rooms, and yeah, we'll still be able to get it done. And that gives us 35 potion stats. We end up getting the Horde to 200 with no additional bonuses. If you wanted to, you can upgrade Kazale. I personally did not end up doing so. But of course, as usual, whenever it comes to factions, you can end up upgrading Kazale, specifically for this one. And at level 12, you end up getting 25% to your faction horde, and the other one at 14 giving additional 25%. You also end up gaining some kingdom team bonus, which whenever you're using multiple different troops from the kingdom, which applies to the pure faction team, gains a little bit extra stats. So those are kind of things that you can end up doing to help out pure faction a little bit if you find that you're struggling with getting it done. But anyways, that is pretty much everything with the faction. Overall, main things to take away is the legend is potentially somewhat decent. The layout overall is pretty much something you would completely ignore. And overall, going forward, it is not really a faction you're going to bother farming because of that. And it's a pretty average stealth, basically across the line. However, it does have one of the coolest pets in the entire game, I must say. And I absolutely love this pet. If there's any reason to actually do this faction, it is for this pet. There's actually a funny story about this pet. So, they did a poll a while back to try to get a community pet into the game. And they ended up trying to basically just did a bunch of things and just put up the most popular ones and just kind of did a vote to it. And the 2 at the time that were the highest vote were the Dragon Kitty and a Doomskull, because Doomskulls just came out, so it was pretty popular at the time to try to get a Doomskull pet or something similar. However, the Doomskull pet was slightly ahead. So we got our entire stream to upvote the Dragon Kitty. The Dragon Kitty then won. However, they then made multiple designs of the Dragon Kitty, and unfortunately, the design that I really liked, which was this design right here, didn't actually make it into the game, but since they still had the asset, they used it for this, and then boom, there we go. The design that I made into the game was, gosh, where'd it go? It's this one right over here, might as well show it. Some of you might have it. I'm not sure when they've done another release of it. I think they kind of handed it out and never did it again, so it's actually a somewhat rarer pet, oddly enough. Where's this Dragon Kitty? I named that one Dragon Kitty. That's not the Dragon Kitty, though. Where on earth is this Dragon Kitty? I want to show it real quick. I must find it. It's hiding in all of the things here. I know you are in here. I will show the one that got added. Right there. This was the one that actually made it in. But the other design I like a lot better. But that was the one that got voted in. And there's the better one, definitively. And it came out today. So make sure to get it. I'll probably be wearing the pet a lot once we end up getting it tonight. But anyways, guys, that's everything for this video. If you still have any other questions, feel free to leave it in the comment section below. All the teams mentioned in this video will be in the descriptions. I'll probably even add the other variant, like the Gargoyle one I mentioned, and a couple other things like that too. So we should have several teams within there. And as I mentioned earlier, we'll be covering the Pure Faction and Deathless tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here on the YouTube channel and doing a stream for that. Anyways, guys, thank you all so much for watching and have a wonderful weekend. Best of luck with the faction. You still have the rest of today and all of tomorrow. At Monday Reset, this event will be done, so you still have plenty of time to go and complete it out. Good luck, everyone, and goodbye. Thanks for watching.